Just before I introduce Tim formally today, I thought I would outline the Victorian Chamber's response to yesterday's budget. In our view, this budget is all about the 3 Ps: the health patients, participation in the workforce, and provincial. This is clearly an election budget which delivers a major investment in health, education, skills, industry development and regional Victoria. We do welcome the investment in skills and training, as well as the investment in major events and tourism, including the $2.6 billion for the 2026 Commonwealth Games, which will have, for the first time in the history of the Commonwealth Games, a strong regional focus. But we know there will be benefits for Melbourne in that, particularly with the opening and closing ceremonies. Importantly, there's also a plan to pay back the significant debt that was accrued during the pandemic through the Vic Roads joint venture to get Victoria back in surplus by the Treasurer's predictions by 25-26. While the commitments for business are modest, we are pleased that the government has adopted some of the proposals put forward by the Victorian Chamber. These include making it easier to operate a business through the improved use of the Services Victoria app, which directly aligns with our call for a business concierge service to cut red tape and cut paperwork and ultimately save business time. We strongly believe that business has a leading role to play in Victoria's economic recovery, and Tim knows that we will continue to put forward the ideas that will help our members thrive. We want to ensure that Victoria continues to be the best place to live, to learn, to work and to operate a business. To that end, Tim, we hope to see further measures adopted to support business in the lead up to the state election later this year, and that should include some further initiatives around tax reform as well. So then, let's hear from the Treasurer. Tim Pallas is the Treasurer of Victoria, Minister for Economic Development and Minister for Industrial Relations. Yesterday, he handed down his 8th state budget since he assumed the portfolio in 2014, and it is perhaps one of his most important as we look to turbocharge our recovery as we come out of the pandemic. We enjoy, and we're very honoured to enjoy, such an open and trusted relationship with the Treasurer. And I do want to publicly thank Tim for your accessibility and your genuine care for Victorian business as we navigated the pandemic. You are unbelievably always available, and for that I'm certainly appreciative. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Treasurer of Victoria, Tim Pallas.
We were confident of a quick bounce back, and that's a surprise even for me, that because, well, I'm a professional pessimist, so the fact that we bounced back quickly is a pleasant surprise. But the fact that we bounced back so quickly is really a testament to the effort, the resilience and the adaptability of the Victorian people. We're confident, of course, that having endured the challenges that we've had to confront, opportunity is knocking for the state of Victoria. Employment has risen by 280,000 jobs since September 2020, and it's forecast to keep growing. The unemployment rate is the lowest since current records began, and labour force participation is near record highs. It's particularly pleasing to see that the recovery in the labour market's been inclusive. Women, young people, single parents who were the most adversely affected during the COVID-19 outbreaks in both 2020 and 2021, I'm pleased to say that by earlier this year, their material circumstances have vastly improved. The proportion of workers amongst these groups have recovered to above pre-pandemic levels. Under the coalition government, Victoria's economy went backwards relative to the national average. In contrast, the Andrews government has overseen strong economic growth prior to COVID, well above the national average. Due to the pandemic, our economy took a hit, and just like jurisdictions around the world, so we were in no special situation, but we also had to confront the challenges that were directed towards us. But the budget really shows that the outlook for Victoria and the Victorian economy is strong. It's forecast to grow 3.25% in 22-23, following expected growth of 5.5% in 22-21.
But let's get into it. Treasurer, 8 budgets. I don't think I've seen you as upbeat about a budget, given what you're coming off. There are piles of debt. There are huge demands on the budget. You don't even have a AAA credit rating to rave about. Were you surprised at how quickly the budget's recovered?
Oh, well, yeah, Heidi, I have been quite... look, the job of a treasurer, which is a little atypical for me because you're supposed to talk things up. And I much prefer to just be frank with people about the circumstances that confront us. Because I figure, the best thing you can give is as accurate an assessment of the situation that we confront. AAA credit rating, of course, is important, but we have to have a AAA approach to the way that we manage our budget. There was no way that we were going to keep a AAA in circumstances where we just had to push money out the door into the pockets of households and businesses and massively increase our public health and education response in circumstances where we had to connect people who were effectively disconnected because of social distancing requirements. So important for me is a AAA mentality to the way that we manage our budget as opposed to necessarily immediately getting back to a AAA credit rating. And why do I say it? Well, because there's not much difference between how much bonds cost me, whether I'm AAA credit rated or not. In fact, the Commonwealth at the end of March was borrowing money at about 2.48% for a 3-year bonds, and we were borrowing them at about 2.35%. Not much in it really, but the discipline of how you govern and where your priorities lie is vitally important. Can I also say just briefly, because you don't want me to filibuster,
no,
is that if I'm feeling a little bit upbeat, it's because we've come from a pretty dark place, I'll be honest. November 2020, when we developed our last budget, I remember having a conversation with the Premier. I said, look, I feel I'm in this really deep pool and I can't touch bottom. And if you can't touch bottom, you can't push back up. And we had to develop a set of strategies, economic strategies, that showed us what success looked like. That was our fiscal plan. We've adhered to it and it's demonstrating that it works. But I've got to tell you, back then, to some extent, it felt a bit like a profession of faith rather than a hard roadmap. And of course, our faith in the Victorian people and the Victorian economy's got us to where we are.
How did you know you were almost at the bottom, ready to push back up?
I didn't. To be honest, I suppose September was the lowest point. September 2020 was the lowest point of the employment market. So we were probably starting to see embryonic signs of improvement in data that was coming back. So we could probably have worked on the assumption that we were almost there. Remember, we framed that budget in November because there was no point trying to frame a budget in the normal period in May, because essentially the job was to get money out the door and spend it. So I basically went into the Parliament and I said, give me an appropriation so that I can get access to a lot of money, but basically I'm going to tell you about what I've applied that money to later in the year, once we've worked out exactly how things are playing out. It was an extraordinary set of circumstances, and I want to pay tribute to the courage of my cabinet ministers, my caucus members, but most particularly the Premier, who all the way through kept his head and kept focused on what we had to do to help the Victorian people, not worry about what debilitation was being affected upon our balance sheet during that time.
We talk about long COVID as a medical issue, but businesses do increasingly tell us, especially small businesses, that there's long COVID for them, that we might be through the worst of it immediately now, but there's the debts that will run up for businesses that will take a long time to pay back. Some won't make it. Is there a similar feel for the state budget?
I'm not sure I agree, I've got to say. I think, yes, this has been a traumatic event, and the nature of industry, the nature of businesses affected is disparate. some industries have clearly been dealt a harsh blow. If you're running a restaurant in metropolitan Melbourne, you've been pretty hard done by in circumstances where foot traffic is slowly getting back. I think we're at about 75% during the week. We're about 84% overall in CBD foot traffic at the moment. But we've still got a way to go, and those industries, I think, will have been at the cutting edge of the debilitating nature of this economic event. But tourism operators, broader hospitality operators, they've found it particularly difficult. And might I say, not exclusively, but particularly those in the CBD. That's why we put $200 million in with the City of Melbourne to try and find ways to activate and bring to life our CBD, and that's why our major event strategy is so obviously aggressive at the moment to get people back into the city.
Did you think about any more money for the CBD?
Well, I figure first we've got to spend the money we put aside. So we did put aside $200 million over last year and next year, this coming financial year. So that money still has to be spent. Look, we're up to looking at what the financial implications of the dust settling on this economic event, what it looks like and where we need to continue to intervene. Perhaps I shouldn't say that on the back of just framing a budget to create an expectation there's more there, but honestly, the one thing this government has consistently sought to do is be there when it's apparent that the community and business need help, and we will be.
It's a little bit hard for me to see past the lights, so if you do have a question, throw your hand up. If I haven't seen you yet, yell out at me when they hand you a microphone. There's one down here from the media. If there's any businesses in the room that want to ask a question, this is your chance to put it directly to the Treasurer. You can see he doesn't bite. He's perfectly friendly. Right. Treasurer, tell me, in terms of regional economy, regional businesses, $2.6 billion for the Commonwealth Games. Are you guaranteeing us we'll get a decent return on that investment, that it will be worthwhile for local communities, for businesses in regional areas?
Absolutely, and I'll guarantee you one more thing, it'll be fun. The idea of $2.6 billion, look, it's a lot of money in anybody's language, but also we produced the business case, which shows that we expect that there'll be a $3 billion return, and more than that, the value in this is that we get to improve, of course, our events facilities in these regional centres. We get to improve our housing offering in these regional centres. Okay, as part of this event, but in a broader sense, an enduring legacy that will ensure that these games have not just been fun, not just a 2-week party, as it were, to celebrate how awesome regional Victoria is, but also to recognise that we can make some strategic investments out of this.
$3 billion. Can we see the business case? Are you releasing it to us?
I don't know. I assume we will, yes. We always have this argument. You say we should release it. We say, well, wait a minute, we want to work it through. Eventually we release it begrudgingly, but yes.
I think I have a question for you. Table 11.
Thanks, Heidi. Congratulations, Tim Pallas, on a very good budget in very, very trying circumstances.
Could you just identify yourself for us, please?
Nick Rees from the City of Melbourne. So my question is about the GST arrangements, and I think everybody in this room would agree that Victoria is being absolutely ripped off under the current arrangements. But my question is, what are we going to do about it? And I ask that in the context of Western Australia having in recent times managed to renegotiate their GST arrangements with the Commonwealth such that they're going to get $4 billion this year that they wouldn't have got previously. Now, $4 billion, that's 40,000 nurses in our hospitals, 40,000 teachers in our schools. It's a lot of money. So my question is, what are we going to do here in Victoria to get a better deal for our state from the Commonwealth?
Thanks, Nick. That's a great question. I read your article, Vexit. I loved it. The South will rise again.
Will it? Are you being serious about Vexit?
About?
Vexit?
No.
Oh. Sorry, Nick.
Goodness me. I'm a proud Australian, I've got to tell you, and I think our country works best when we work together. And certainly, I think Nick's article was a bit tongue-in-cheek, really, about the fact that we were being ripped off, and it's brutally apparent that we are. The bigger problem for us is, what does this mean for national reform going forward? Because quite frankly, if the Commonwealth were to come to the state of Victoria, and I don't care what iteration of the Commonwealth we're talking about, Labor or Liberal, and said, look, we've got a really good idea, we want you to hand over a substantial part of your tax base, we'll manage it and distribute it back to you in a fair way. On past form, I would say not on your life will we participate in that process, because we've seen how you've distorted it. I'd prefer to manage my own tax base and make my own decisions about how I distribute money. Don't get me wrong, I believe in horizontal fiscal equalisation. It's a mouthful, I can't pronounce it, but I believe in it. It's one of those things that says, look, as Australians, we believe that every Australian state and every Australian citizen should get access to at least a minimum appropriate level of provision. And generally that means New South Wales and Victoria subsidise the other states and people in those states. But we've got to this ridiculously perverse situation now where West Australia, who didn't have any substantial COVID outbreak, who, well, up until, of course, Omicron, but who are running massive surpluses and are likely to profit by a distorted floor price being put on the GST, largely because commodity prices are going through the roof, that is, they dig stuff up. That means to the tune of some $23 billion, that is a real worry. They're running surpluses of $6 to $8 billion. I mean, what are they going to do in terms of their contribution to horizontal fiscalisation, equalisation? Are they going to basically say every punter in West Australia gets a mansion with a pool? I mean, this is bizarre stuff, and it is unjustifiable. Now, I know everybody's worried about West Australia and how they might vote at an upcoming federal election. I'm worried about the coherency and the integrity of our federation. The states that need the help, South Australia, Tasmania, they should be provided for, and New South Wales and Victoria should play their part in contributing to that. But what's going on at the moment is distorting our taxing regimes to achieve political outcomes, and it's wrong.
Isn't this one of those things that's as old as time, though? Fights between the states and the Commonwealth?
Oh, yes.
Is there an actual fix?
Well, the fix will ultimately, I think, be that, and it's a suboptimal fix, it'll be that the other states will pick on the Commonwealth until they actually do the right thing and maintain that no worse off guarantee in perpetuity. Because if they don't, it's going to cost the state of Victoria, well, $3 billion over the next 4 years, and that number will get bigger and bigger while ever resource prices go through the roof. That is, while ever West Australia doesn't need a floor price on their GST, then of course the pain across the nation will be felt. And it makes no sense, like a state with, 2 million people is getting an overwhelming share of the GST pool, when we've got schools and hospitals in Tasmania and South Australia, and can I say, quite frankly, Victoria as well, that could at least be provided for more adequately in circumstances if we had a government that was prepared to think about fairness rather than politics.
I think we'll have to try to steer you away from your pet subject. To the back of the room.
Thank you, Danny Hunter from the Property Council. Congratulations, Treasurer, on your 8th budget. Fantastic to see the Victorian economy at such a strength. It certainly really is starting to boom, and it really is powered by property, and the property industry is really pleased and proud to be part of that. You must have been very pleased to see the revenue increases from the property sector over the last year. Treasurer, the interest rate rise yesterday is something that I would really like to hear from you about, particularly with the very innovative and sensible initiative around the Victorian Future Fund and that future approach on stabilising and addressing the debt burden. How will the interest rate rise impact the government's approach in any way? I mean, I'm sure it has been factored in and anticipated, but I'd just really like to hear a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, look, thanks very much for your contribution to the Victorian coffers. It's greatly appreciated. And can I also say, nobody ever seems to take the Treasurer seriously when he thanks you for your taxes, but I genuinely do. Can I also make the point that I think the challenges of rising interest rates, we've sort of known it's been coming. I think we've all probably had a pretty strong suspicion that interest rates are coming. The RBA did a great job when they stepped in and they basically started effectively buying through the secondary market the bond offering of the states. It avoided a liquidity crisis at the worst point in the economic cycle. So going back into 2020, they did an incredible job. I think they might have assessed how long they'd be able to keep those interest rates low. I didn't fall for it, and I don't think too many others did. We basically took the view that we would start buying longer-term bonds in the state's interests, and therefore start to inoculate ourselves from the practical effect of interest rates going up in the short term. Now, that's not to say that there'll be no effect. There will be. We buy 3-year bonds, we buy 10-year bonds. The longer tail in the bond basically means, of course, that the state pays a higher price for that bond issuance. But we are very much of the view, we've taken a substantial increase in interest rates because what we've done is we've plotted to market expectations in our forward estimates. So we've assumed exactly where where the interest rate market is going. I hope we're right, and I think I can say with a fair degree of confidence we've been pretty much well spot on the money up until now, but we've got a long distance to journey. The practical consequence of increases in interest rates will mean that our interest rate payments as a percentage of our own source revenue, as a percentage of our revenue, not our own source revenue, will grow from about 3.6, 3.7% up to about 6% over the next 12, 18 months is our expectation. So that's, I would prefer not to have to pay it, but it's something that we've adequately catered for, and it's all accounted for in our forward estimates.
We're just about out of time. Oh, no, one more? Up table 24.
Hi, Treasurer. Congratulations for the new state budget. It's Mary Wang from RSM Australia. I'm the national leader for supply chain and procurement. So I can see in this new budget there are a lot big infrastructure projects and bigger spends. So my question is, how are you going to deliver these projects since we are now experiencing a lot of supply chain issues? Whether it's in cafe or in restaurant, in advanced manufacturing, or even in universities. We have experienced so big shortage of laborers in constructions. How are we going to complete these projects beautifully? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your question too. Look, the challenges that we're confronting in terms of our infrastructure projects, I don't think are insurmountable, but they will be challenging, and they'll require us to be consistently diligent in how we deal with it, and we are. So first of all, as a government, we've basically said we need to develop homegrown skills. That's why we put a very substantial investment in free TAFE. That's why in this budget we've identified our headway apprenticeships, which are about making sure that we can start apprenticeships in every government secondary school in the state, take a lot of the burden off business and get young people started on a career or in a trade going forward. We know that about 1 in 10 workers in this state owes their employment to infrastructure, and we know that about 190,000 jobs are directly attributable to the government's infrastructure spend. So making sure that we manage it effectively is key. The supply chain challenges that we're confronting are quite profound, and they will need to be managed over time, and I'm pleased to see that the Better Regulation Commissioner has done some work about how we improve supply chain in the construction industry, and she's been providing us with advice about how we can assist business on that. Additional to that, we are working with other jurisdictions to see if we can better smooth out the offering into the market so we don't crowd each other out with our offerings. And might I say, we've been working particularly closely with the New South Wales Government in this respect. Finally, looking at new models by which we enter into contracts with business for the purposes of the delivery of these projects, recognising that we have to have a shifting approach to where risk is best borne in these projects, so that we don't end up the taxpayer bearing all the burden of risk, but also to recognise that we cannot put a disproportionate level of risk on the private sector, particularly for things that they can't adequately predict will occur. For example, long tail, decade-long provision of what the price escalators on raw materials may be. So we're doing a lot of work in this space, and I think we're demonstrating that we're getting much better at it. For example, the cost increase on our major projects, which is about $183 billion worth of projects commencing or continuing this year, if you exclude the aberration of the Westgate Tunnel settlement, 1% increase on cost right across that portfolio. So we are getting better at containing costs, and it's not about squeezing business, it's about working more collaboratively with them.
We are just about out of time, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I need 5 words or less answers on. Payroll tax relief, did you consider?
Well, no, not in this budget, but we've, of course, done plenty of payroll tax relief up until now.
That's more than the words you were allowed. That's noted. Why not this budget?
At the moment, you might have noticed I'm running a $17 billion deficit.
Oh, I noticed.
And as a consequence, we've got to make choices in order to get fiscal repair underway. So now's not the right time for it.
How many more budgets have you got in you?
As many as the Premier and the people of Victoria give me, but I am definitely fronting up for another run round the track.
Good. And has Anthony Albanese given you any indication he'll, 1, address the GST shortfall for Victoria, or 2, have some money spare for Suburban Rail Loop?
Oh, look, I think no.
Short answer.
No is a simple answer. Because it's theirs to announce, not mine.
They like the Suburban Rail Loop?
They love the Suburban Rail Loop. As you recall, Anthony Albanese fronted up when we announced it some years ago.
With a chequebook, they love it that much, potentially?
You'll have to wait and see.
Tim Pallas, thank you.